She hit me with a $12,200 noise violation for laughing too loud during my own Saturday BBQ, then called 911 when I didn't take down the smoker by 6 p.m. 12 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up, and I was already holding their bylaw in my hand. Welcome to HOA Society. I'm Mark Danner, civil engineer out of Lake Orion, Michigan, and I'm about to tell you how I evicted an entire HOA without breaking a single law. If you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happened when paper met fire. Tell me where you're watching from, because every county's got its own kind of Karen board, and I want to know yours. I bought the cabin 3 years ago after my wife Sarah passed. It was our retirement plan, a 1,400 square foot log place with cedar siding and a dock just long enough for a canoe. She'd made me promise to keep it alive and loud. Those were her words. So every weekend I grilled, laughed with neighbors, and tried to keep the sound of living echoing off the lake. Then came the HOA. They called themselves the Pine Shore Preservation Committee, 5 retirees who'd bought the adjacent properties in the 90s. Their president, Linda Kaufman, was the type who wielded a clipboard like a badge. First came the polite notices. Repaint your mailbox, wrong shade of green. Remove your solar lights, non-conforming, and limit gatherings to no more than 4 guests at any one time. The cabin wasn't technically in their subdivision. I was 51 feet outside their recorded boundary, but that didn't stop them. On May 8th, a letter arrived certified mail. Unauthorized event structure, meaning my BBQ canopy, subject to $200 per day fines. I laughed it off, but by the 14th, the balance sheet stapled to my door read $200. That's when I realized they were testing jurisdiction. Sarah's old voice rang in my head. Don't let anyone take your place away. I walked over that evening. Linda stood in her driveway in a lilac cardigan, the smell of bleach drifting from her open garage. She crossed her arms. You're inside the HOA's aesthetic perimeter, whether you like it or not. I asked her to show me the plat map. She said, we enforce by spirit, not line. That line burned. I started digging that night. County GIS records, assessor files, even scanned PDFs of old deeds from 1984. There it was, Parcel 17B, mine, never annexed. Not a single covenant or restriction filed against it. Yet somehow, they'd issued 11 citations in 2 months. My neighbor, old Joe Tillman, wheeled over his oxygen tank and muttered, they've been bullying folks since the first dock went up. Everyone's too tired to fight. He pushed a thermos into my hand. You still got your drafting tools? Maybe start measuring. That's when the engineer in me woke up. I set survey stakes along my property line at exactly 0.00 degrees deviation from the county coordinates. Everyone hammered flush. Then I printed the coordinates on a laminated sign. Private property. Outside HOA jurisdiction. 2 days later, the sign vanished. On May 21st, I installed a motion-activated camera facing the road. The next morning, I had footage. Linda's husband, crouched, unscrewing it. 3:12 a.m. I didn't call the cops. I wanted pattern, not chaos. So I logged everything. Date, time, photo, GPS tag. Knowledge nugget number 1. Under Michigan's MCL 559.215, HOA authority stops strictly at recorded plats. No implied enforcement zones exist, no matter what aesthetic perimeter they claim. A week later, another certified envelope. This one labeled, Final Notice of Lien Intent. Except they couldn't file a lien. They had no covenant to lien on. It was fraud by intimidation. I scanned it, highlighted the fake authority section, and emailed it to my municipal attorney friend, Alicia Ramos. She called within an hour. They're overreaching, Mark. Don't bite yet. Document every move. We might need a full administrative complaint. That night, I lit the grill again. It was late, maybe 9:30. Lake air thick with charcoal. A few friends over, quiet laughter, then red and blue lights. Linda stood behind the cruiser, clutching her phone, pointing like she'd caught a fugitive. I handed the officer my printout of the parcel map. He looked at it, nodded once, and said, You're fine, sir. They can't enforce here. Linda's jaw twitched. He's disrupting community peace. The cop closed his notebook. Ma'am, peace isn't an HOA ordinance outside your line. That was the first crack. After they left, I sat on the dock, feet dangling above the dark water, Sarah's old scarf around my neck. The chill bit through, but I felt awake for the first time in months. This wasn't about a grill. It was about standing on land we'd built a dream around. I decided then, I wasn't just going to defend it, I was going to fix this place. The next morning I drove to the county clerk's office, gray cinderblock walls, faint hum of fluorescent lights, that old paper smell like toner and coffee. The clerk, a younger guy named Neil with ink-stained fingers, looked up when I slid the HOA's lien notice across the counter. He frowned, typed a few lines into his terminal, and turned the screen toward me. "See that?" he said. "No recorded encumbrances. They don't own jurisdiction over your parcel. Never did." I asked him to print the verification, certified copy, $8 stamp. The sound of that rubber seal hitting paper was the first satisfying thunk in weeks. By then, word was spreading. 2 more homeowners emailed me. A retired teacher named Janet, who'd been fined $500 for having a wooden birdhouse, and a single dad named Marcus who'd received a weed height violation while his wife was in chemo. The HOA's pattern wasn't random. It was revenue. Every month they levied administrative penalties, raking in nearly $18,000 a year from less than 40 properties. I spent that weekend creating a spreadsheet, date of citation, amount, reason, signature. The same 2 initials appeared on every one, LK, Linda Kaufman. Monday morning, Marcus called, whispering like he was leaking state secrets. "They're meeting tonight about external properties posing visual risk. That's you, man." I almost smiled. Perfect. I went, uninvited. The meeting was in the clubhouse, a beige-paneled room with folding chairs, coffee urns, and that tang of stale carpet cleaner. Linda sat at the head table beneath a fluorescent buzz, reading minutes in her clipped tone. When I entered, the room went still. She stopped mid-sentence. "This is a private board session," she said. "Then why was the agenda posted on the public bulletin?" I asked, pointing to the printout taped by the door. "You posted it under Open Meeting Compliance, Section 6B. Her face stiffened. "You're not a member." "I'm the reason you called the cops, Linda. That makes me a stakeholder in your misuse of public resources." She gestured to her vice president, a thin man in khakis. "Remove him." But nobody moved. Maybe they were tired, or maybe curiosity finally outweighed fear. I placed a single manila envelope on the table. "You fined people $18,000 last year. Here's your own bylaws stating you can't impose financial penalties beyond $50 per occurrence without a supermajority vote. You never held one." Her lips trembled just slightly before tightening again. "You're misinterpreting." "No," I said, sliding out a certified copy of their last annual report. "I'm reading." That night I uploaded every document, PDFs, scans, minutes, into a shared drive titled Pine Shore Files and shared it anonymously through a local Facebook group. By sunrise, a dozen comments filled with disbelief and screenshots of their own fines. That's when the retaliation began. 3 citations in 1 week. Improper lighting, unauthorized structure, public disturbance. Except none of those codes existed outside their jurisdiction. Then came the wellness check. 2 officers knocking at 10 p.m. "Someone reported yelling and possible distress," one said, glancing past me into the quiet living room where the only sound was an old record spinning softly. I showed them my logs, time-stamped. The cop shook his head. "We've had 3 of these this month, all same caller." "Linda Kaufman?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. By now, I'd started copying Alicia, my attorney friend, on everything. She taught me a tactic called constructive pattern documentation, basically building a time-linked proof of harassment with logs, witnesses, and evidence. "Don't sue yet," she said. "You're close to something bigger." It was Marcus who brought the clue. He dropped a crumpled letter on my porch one evening, an HOA assessment demand for stormwater maintenance. "They're charging us $450 each," he said, "but the retention pond's been bone dry for a year." So we checked. The maintenance contract listed a company called Mid-Lake Services LLC, supposedly hired to clean the pond quarterly. Registered address? Linda's home. Registered agent? Her husband. That's when everything clicked. They weren't just bullies. They were billing themselves. Knowledge nugget number 2. In most states, HOA boards must disclose conflicts of interest involving any vendor where a board member or relative holds ownership or profit interest. Non-disclosure can void the contract and trigger restitution. The next HOA letter came hand-delivered, folded like a threat. Cease unauthorized public commentary or face trespass enforcement. I opened it on the porch in front of the messenger and said, "Tell Linda to look up parcel boundaries before she talks about trespass." He muttered, "Oh, you should stop stirring things." That night, Marcus texted, "They're calling an emergency session. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. I looked at the map taped above my desk. Parcel lines glowing under a desk lamp, Sarah's photo pinned beside it. Her handwriting on the back. Don't back down. So I didn't. The next evening, I arrived 5 minutes early. The clubhouse lot shimmered with heat, and I could already hear Linda's voice echoing through the walls. I paused, breathing in the smell of cut grass and lake water, letting the anger settle into something cold and clear. When I pushed open the door, all eyes turned. Linda stopped mid-sentence. "You again," she said. "Still outside your jurisdiction," I replied, holding up a thin blue folder. That folder contained something she didn't know existed yet, an assignment deed I'd spent the last 2 weeks arranging quietly through an anonymous LLC. I'd bought something small, but powerful. Reversal number 1 was already in motion. Inside the folder was a single-page instrument recorded that morning at 10:42 a.m., a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of the common access easement that every homeowner in Pine Shore used to reach the lake. It turned out the original developer had retained it separately decades ago, and after 2 corporate dissolutions, it went up for tax sale. My LLC, Blue Dock Holdings, bought it for $4,117 to $32. Linda didn't know that yet. She thought she still ruled the shoreline. I didn't speak immediately. I just placed that folder on the table beside the coffee urn, its metal lid hissing faintly. She smirked, mistaking my calm for defeat. "You're wasting everyone's time," she said, "and violating private proceedings." I folded my arms. "Private? You filed financial reports under the Michigan Nonprofit Corporation Act, Section 400D FAPA 2485. Meetings are open to all members, and since you've claimed I'm one, I qualify." AFEs. Who chuckles rippled through the back row. Linda slammed her binder shut. "You're not a stakeholder." "That's funny," I said softly, "because starting at 10:42 this morning, I own the lake easement that gives your entire community access to the water." The room went silent. Even the air conditioner hummed slower somehow. Her face blanched. "That's impossible." I slid the certified deed across the table. The blue notary seal caught the fluorescent light. "Filed, stamped, and paid in full," I said. "You're welcome to verify it in the public record." Her vice president leaned forward, squinting. That's the developer's old parcel." "Was," I corrected. "Now it's mine, which means any maintenance or access decisions go through me, including boat slip permits." For a moment no one spoke. Then Marcus, quiet, solid Marcus, let out a low whistle. "Guess that's what you call poetic." Linda tried to rally. "We'll contest that acquisition." "You can't," I replied. "You let the tax lien expire in 2019. County auctioned it. I simply paid attention." That's when I felt the shift, the room leaning away from her, the small gasps of realization. Power was changing hands quietly, by paper, not by shouting. Knowledge nugget number 3. Under state law, easement rights sold at tax auction transfer with full control over maintenance and access terms, subject only to existing recorded agreements. If none exist, the new owner sets the rules, lawfully. I kept my expression neutral, while inside I could hear Sarah's voice again, that low laugh when she used to tease me about my obsession with paper trails. After the meeting, Linda stormed out, muttering about legal counsel. I stayed behind, shaking hands with a few neighbors who'd been silent victims for years. Janet gripped my arm. "Do you think she'll retaliate?" "She will," I said. "That's why we get ahead of it." Over the next 2 weeks, retaliation became an art form. Anonymous complaints about my unsecured propane tank, notes ped to my gate, a post on the HOA's Facebook page implying I'd tampered with association property. I screenshot everything, time-stamped, logged. Then came the drone. One afternoon, I was replacing a loose shutter when I heard a faint whine above the tree line. A white quadcopter hovered over my yard, camera gimbal twitching. I waved. It darted off, but not before my security cam caught its tag number. Registered to, guess who, Mid-Lake Services LLC. Alicia's reply came within an hour. That's an FAA privacy violation if flown for enforcement. Let's stack it. So I did. Each petty act added another line to the complaint draft. Harassment, false reports, unauthorized surveillance. The file grew thicker by the day, and with each page my anger cooled into precision. At night, though, when the house was quiet, I'd still feel the ache. Sarah's side of the bed untouched, her old lake journal half full of sketches and notes about community garden ideas. That was the part they could never understand. I wasn't fighting for property lines. I was fighting for what she believed this place could be. One evening, Joe wheeled over again, thermos in hand. "You're shaking the hive, kid," he said, voice raspy but proud. "Be ready when they swarm." I nodded. I already bought the smoke. He laughed so hard he started coughing. Damn right. Late June, a new certified letter arrived. This one stamped, Notice of Access Restriction. They were banning me from association-managed shoreline areas. The irony was delicious. I scanned it and sent it to Alicia. Her reply? Perfect. They just banned the owner of that shoreline. This is the one we use. That night, I drafted the agenda for the July 12th meeting myself, under my rights as easement owner. Topic: Public Access Policy Review and Compliance Hearing. I posted it legally, 14 days in advance, on the same bulletin board Linda used. And for good measure, I copied the county's Community Affairs Officer, Sergeant Daniel Morrow, known for attending HOA disputes to maintain civility. This was my stage now. Before heading to bed, I opened Sarah's old scarf drawer, still faintly smelling of cedar and lake water. I whispered, "Tomorrow, we start fixing it." But first, I had to let Linda think she'd won one more time. I spent the next 10 days quiet on purpose. When Linda's next inspection notice appeared on my gate, this time for an unapproved retaining wall, I didn't reply. I left it there, let the weather curl the edges until the ink faded. I wanted her comfortable, convinced that I'd run out of fight. Every hunter knows you don't spring the trap until the bait smells right. Meanwhile, Alicia and I finalized the submission packet for the county's Ombudsman Division. 57 pages of documented harassment, drone surveillance, and financial irregularities, each stamped and indexed. She slid it into a red binder and labeled the spine Pine Shore. Pattern Complaint, 2024-0712. The sound of the metal ring snapping shut hit like a starter pistol. On the afternoon of the 12th, I parked across from the clubhouse. The heat shimmered off the asphalt, making the flags on the entry sign blur like mirages. Inside, rows of folding chairs were already full, neighbors, reporters from the local paper, even a council liaison. And at the back, standing with arms crossed, was Sergeant Morrow, neutral and steady. Linda sat at the head table, stacked with files, water bottles, and a silver nameplate she must have bought herself. She looked up and smiled the way people do before walking into a courtroom thinking they can still bluff the jury. "Before we begin," she said into the mic, "this hearing was not properly authorized. Mr. Danner has no standing to convene association matters." I stepped up to the podium, laid my folder flat, and clicked the mic on. The feedback squeal snapped everyone's attention forward. "Actually, I do," I said. "Under the recorded easement filed at 10:42 a.m. on June 5th, all access to the lake, including this path and dock, is now subject to the terms of Blue Dock Holdings." That's me. This hearing was posted according to statute. Her face drained color. That document was fraudulently obtained. Sergeant Morrow's voice carried calmly from the back. "I checked the record this morning, ma'am. It's legitimate." The murmur through the crowd was electric, like the moment before thunder. I reached into the folder and pulled out the red binder Alicia had given me. "This," I said, holding it up so the overhead light glinted off the plastic cover, "is a complete record of selective enforcement, false citations, and financial self-dealing by members of this board. I'm submitting it to the county ombudsman and the state's nonprofit bureau at 9 a.m. tomorrow." Linda tried to laugh. "You think you can threaten us with paperwork?" "No," I said quietly. I'm offering transparency. You can choose to cooperate and reform, or let the state dissolve the charter. Either way, this ends tonight." The room erupted, neighbors whispering, some clapping softly. Marcus raised his hand. "We've all had enough. Let him speak." Linda banged her gavel. "Order!" But the gavel cracked on impact, handle snapping clean in two. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. I placed one last item on the table, a color photo of the dry retention pond, time-stamped May 29th, and the invoice from Midlake Services, signed by her husband for quarterly dredging. The silence afterward was heavier than any shouting could have been. "Conflict of interest, non-disclosed, profit realized," I said. "That's a misdemeanor under state nonprofit law. You've got receipts right there." She started to speak, then stopped when Morrow stepped forward, resting a hand on the table. "You might want to call your attorney, ma'am." The meeting broke into wispy. "Yours, but as someone muttered, 'She's done.' Another said, 'About damn time.' As people filed out, Janet touched my arm. 'Do you think they'll actually face charges?' "They will," I said, closing the binder, "because we're not asking for vengeance. We're asking for fairness." Outside, the sun was sliding down behind the pines, turning the lake into hammered copper. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt the same quiet she used to describe, the kind that means something's healing. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A man's voice. "Mr. Danner, this is Investigator Caldwell with the State Attorney's Office. We received your submission and would like to meet next week." That's when I knew the dominoes had started falling. But Linda wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I found the back gate padlock snapped, tire tracks across my lawn, and the BBQ pit overturned. They wanted chaos. They wanted me to lash out. I took photos instead, sent them straight to Alicia. Her reply, "Perfect. Let them dig. Every mark they make goes into evidence." That afternoon, I filed a trespass report, calm as a surgeon. Morrow showed up himself, camera flashing, tape measure in hand. "You sure you're ready for where this is going?" he asked. "Ready enough," I said. "It's not about me anymore." He smiled slightly. Good answer. For the next week, the HOA board went quiet, emails unanswered, website down. I could feel the pressure building, the kind that cracks facades. Then, just before sunset on the 20th, an envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no address, just my name written in jittery pen. Inside, one line. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I laughed out loud. "No, Linda," I said to the empty room. "You don't." That night, the storm came in heavy, rain hammering the roof, wind pushing against the shutters like an angry breath. I stood on the porch, watching the lightning flash across the lake, and for a split second, I thought I saw her reflection, Sarah, smiling through the glass the way she used to during summer storms. Then it was gone, just me and the thunder. The next morning, the retaliation moved from whispers to full assault. I woke to find a bright orange sticker on my truck windshield, tow notice, abandoned vehicle. It was parked in my own driveway. Later, a county code inspector showed up claiming a noise complaint. When I asked who filed it, he sighed. "Anonymous, but you already know who." He glanced around the property. "Everything looks fine here," he said, voice low. "But between us, keep a file. They'll keep calling until someone bites." By week's end, I had 11 separate notices taped to my door. Everything from unapproved porch decor to illegal burning. Each one went straight into the binder. Alicia's advice echoed in my head. Don't get angry. Get documented. Still, the strain crept in. Every knock at the door made my pulse jump. One night, I caught myself unplugging the porch light before bed, just in case another complaint blamed me for light pollution. That's when Joe rolled over again, oxygen tank wheezing, and parked himself in front of me. "You're looking like a man trying not to blink," he said. "I'm fine," I lied. He tapped his thermos. "You ever seen a bully stop 'cause you flinched?" "No." "Then stop flinching." He stayed for an hour, talking about his late wife, about how she used to grow marigolds by the fence no matter how many letters the HOA sent. She'd say, "They can find my flowers all they want, but they'll still bloom." It was the reminder I needed. I built my own bloom. 3 days later, I installed a wooden post by the water line with a simple brass plaque. Easement managed under Blue Dock Holdings. Public use restricted to registered owners. Every word lawful, every inch measured. That sign was my line in the sand. Within 24 hours, the HOA Facebook group lit up. Unauthorized signage by Mr. Danner, misrepresentation of property rights. Emergency board meeting tonight. Perfect. I parked my truck in full view of their clubhouse that evening, but didn't go in. I wanted them to feel unobserved, safe enough to scheme. The next morning, Marcus forwarded me screenshots, Linda instructing members to secure access to the lake by any means. Knowledge nugget number 4. Any directive encouraging entry or alteration of property without owner consent constitutes criminal trespass under most state statutes, even for HOA officials. Board immunity does not apply when actions exceed lawful authority. By July 24th, their overreach was complete. A landscaper crew showed up and began cutting through the small chain at the easement gate. I stepped out calmly, phone recording. "Can I help you?" I asked. One man shrugged. "We were told by HOA President Kaufman to remove this barrier." "That barrier's on my property," I said, pointing to the deed staked beside the gate, laminated under clear plastic. "You're trespassing." He hesitated. She said she owned it. I tilted my phone slightly so he could see the live timestamp. "You might want to call her again before you keep cutting." They left, quickly. Within an hour, I emailed the footage to Alicia and copied the county investigator. Her reply was almost gleeful. "You just caught them in actionable trespass." That's the final nail. Still, the next 48 hours felt like living inside a low hum of nerves. Every creak outside made me check the locks. I'd lost sleep, weight, patience. But the fear had clarity to it. It sharpened things. And then came the knock I'd been waiting for. Not the angry tap of Linda's messengers, but the firm, practiced rhythm of law enforcement. I opened the door to find Sergeant Morrow, rain beating on his hat. He handed me a single-page document. "Search and seizure warrant," he said, "for HOA records. Investigator Caldwell's team just executed it." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "That they found bank transfers," he continued. "Midlake Services funneled $42,000 to a personal account. Kaufman's name's on it." It felt like the storm breaking after months of pressure, air rushing out, replaced with something new. Not triumph, relief. I looked out at the lake, rain starting to fall again. "So what happens now?" He smiled. "Now? We clean house, and you might want to be at the next meeting." That next meeting would change everything. The next HOA meeting wasn't scheduled, it was summoned. The county ordered it after Investigator Caldwell's team froze the association's accounts pending review. By Friday afternoon, the rumor mill was boiling. People said Linda was refusing to step down, that she'd lawyered up, that the board would suspend operations. None of that mattered. By law, they had to hold one final open session to address the investigation findings. I showed up early, binder under my arm, camera on standby. The air in the clubhouse was thick with sweat and tension, every chair filled. Linda sat in her usual spot, but without her polished veneer, her cardigan wrinkled, eyes rimmed red. She wasn't wearing her HOA badge this time. The county investigator, Caldwell, stood near the podium, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that could cut drywall. "We'll begin," he said, tapping the mic. "This proceeding concerns misuse of association funds and unauthorized enforcement activity." Linda leaned forward, desperate. "Before you proceed, I need to clarify that these accusations are politically motivated by one disgruntled property owner." I raised my hand. "Disgruntled. Try documented." She glared. "You've been harassing this board with baseless claims." Caldwell interrupted. "Mrs. Kaufman, please sit. You'll have your chance to respond." He turned to me. "Mr. Danner, you filed the original complaint?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Steppens." He jumped to the mic. I could feel every heartbeat echoing against the podium wood. "And I have something new." From my folder, I pulled a USB stick sealed in an evidence bag. This contains footage recorded July 24th, an HOA contracted landscaper cutting through a chain gate under Mrs. Kaufman's direct instruction. The gate stands on property owned by Blue Dock Holdings, per the recorded easement filed June 5th. Caldwell nodded. "We've seen it. It corroborates the trespass report." Linda's voice cracked. "That land was always communal. It's been used by residents for 30 years. "Until it lapsed for non-payment," I replied. You ignored tax notices for 4 consecutive years. You had every chance. Sergeant Morrow stepped up from the back. Mrs. Kaufman, we confirmed that lapse ourselves. The county auction was lawful. So was Mr. Danner's purchase. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Caldwell continued, voice flat. Preliminary audit confirms $42,376 in transfers from association funds to an entity controlled by your spouse. We've referred those findings to the state attorney's office. A gasp ran through the crowd. Linda slumped back, color draining from her face. That was the moment, the first reversal fully realized. My secret leverage had become public truth, and the sound of that confirmation, official, irrefutable, was the sweetest noise I'd ever heard. Visual beat number 1. Caldwell pressed a blue ink stamp down on the association record. Reviewed, pending enforcement action. The echo of the stamp filled the room. Neighbors who'd sat silent for years began whispering, some crying, some laughing softly. Janet wiped her eyes. Marcus just nodded, slow and proud. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The facts did the talking. Caldwell closed his folder. Until further notice, the HOA board is suspended. Temporary oversight will be assigned by the county until elections are held. Linda's final words were barely audible. You'll regret this. I looked her in the mouth. No, I'll remember it. Afterward, as the crowd emptied, I stepped outside into the humid evening air. Fireflies blinked along the tree line. Joe wheeled up, grinning. Heard the stamp all the way out here, he said. Felt like thunder, I answered. He chuckled, handing me his thermos. You just cracked the dam, now watch the flood. He was right. Over the next week, it poured. The local paper ran the headline, HOA president, under investigation for fraud, resigns amid county probe. Insurance carriers suspended coverage pending audit. The HOA's bank froze its line of credit. The domino collapse had begun. But victory brought a new question. What now? Without the HOA, there was a vacuum, and I could already see the cracks forming between neighbors. Some wanted dissolution, others feared chaos. I spent 2 nights walking the property lines, thinking of Sarah's garden sketches, her words about building instead of breaking, and by dawn of the 3rd morning, I knew what had to come next. We weren't done. We were going to rebuild. By the book this time. That meant one more reversal, one more play. But this time, it wouldn't be about leverage. It would be about reform. I called a meeting myself, not in the clubhouse. That place still smelled like fear, but out on the dock, under the open sky. I posted the notice legally. Community discussion, future governance of Pine Shore. No fancy stationery, no threats of fines, just a handwritten sign pinned beside the mailbox cluster. By sunset, 23 people showed up. Folding chairs scraped against the planks, kids chased dragonflies, and someone brought lemonade. For the first time in months, there was laughter instead of whispers. I stood near the edge of the dock, the water dark gold with reflection, and took a breath. I didn't start this fight to destroy something, I said. I started it to remind us who owns Waru, Hat, and who doesn't. Janet nodded, eyes shining. We just want to live without being afraid of letters. Marcus added, without them, who's going to maintain the road, the lights, the mailboxes? We still need rules, just not their kind. That was the heart of it. You can't just tear down a system. You have to replace it with something honest. I flipped open my binder, this time not as a weapon, but as a blueprint. We'll form a transitional council, volunteers only, transparent votes, term limits, every budget published online. We call it the Pine Shore Cooperative. Silence, then a smattering of claps that grew until the sound bounced across the lake. A small voice from the crowd, Mrs. Henson, the retired librarian, asked, would the county allow that? They'll love it, I said, holding up a letter from Investigator Caldwell. He's recommending structural reform instead of full dissolution. He wants a clean legal model for community management, and we're going to give him one. The idea caught fire. Marcus volunteered for maintenance oversight. Janet offered to handle archives. Joe, wheezing through a laugh, said he'd be chief coffee officer. By nightfall, the dock glowed with lantern light, papers spread across a folding table, signatures forming under the steady scratch of pens. It wasn't rebellion anymore, it was reconstruction. But the real showdown came 3 days later. The county required one final formal hearing to ratify the cooperative transfer. Caldwell asked that it be public, recorded, and attended by a neutral authority. He even invited local news. The community center auditorium buzzed with people that morning, neighbors, reporters, even a few county officials curious about the lake that fired its HOA. At the front table, the new cooperative council sat beside me, documents neatly stacked. Then, almost on cue, Linda arrived. She looked smaller somehow, but her voice was still sharp. "This is a farce," she said, loud enough for the cameras. "You're just dismantling lawful governance for anarchy." I turned calm. "We're replacing secret power with open accountability," she sneered. "You'll regret this when the infrastructure collapses and you can't pay for road plowing." "That's why we rewrote the bylaws," I said. "Every expenditure requires dual signatures, quarterly audits, and public posting. No secret accounts, no self-dealing. We learned from your mistakes." Caldwell cleared his throat. "Mrs. Kaufman, this isn't your forum. You've been advised not to comment on pending charges." She froze, lips parting but no words coming out. Then came the moment that changed everything. Visual beat number 2. Caldwell lifted a small black gavel, rainwater dripping from his coat, onto the table. He looked at the cameras and said, "By authority of the county and pursuant to community statute, the Pine Shore Homeowners Association is hereby dissolved effective immediately. Governance transitions to the Pine Shore Cooperative." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was deep, the kind that comes from relief more than celebration. I didn't look at Linda again. I didn't need to. Her chapter was closed. Outside, the rain was falling light and steady. Morrow stood beside his cruiser, nodding at me. "You did it right, Danner. All paper, no punches. Only way it lasts," I said. He smiled. "You'd be surprised how few people get that." Back home, I sat by the fire pit, the same one that had started it all. The old violation notices were still stacked on the table. One by one, I fed them into the flames. The edges curled, orange light flickering across the brass easement sign. That's when I realized it wasn't revenge anymore. It was balance. As the last letter burned, I whispered to Sarah, "You'd like this place now. It finally sounds alive again." The flames hissed, brighter for a second, like she answered back. The following weeks were a strange kind of quiet. No patrol trucks crawling the street, no pastel envelopes taped to doors, no whispered threats about compliance. Just the hum of lawnmowers and the echo of hammers as people fixed what they'd been too scared to before. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in years, folks waved when they passed by. Caldwell's office finalized its findings. The Kaufmans faced charges for embezzlement and false filing of non-profit records. The county prosecutor confirmed restitution agreements totaling $47,000. The HOA's insurer canceled their DO policy, citing gross mismanagement. It all sounded clinical on paper, but when the news broke, people cried. Relief can sound like grief when it finally lands. We held our first cooperative meeting in the open. No closed doors, no executive sessions. Marcus brought a speaker, played low jazz through the evening while Janet read aloud the new transparency charter. "No budget shall be withheld from the public. No vote shall be secret. No member shall rule without term." Each line earned soft applause. That's when I proposed the deal, the second reversal. Instead of dragging this through court for years, I said, we exchange leverage for reform. I'll assign the easement back to the community under the new cooperative, provided 3 conditions are written into the bylaws. Term limits. No one can serve more than 2 years consecutively. Open records. Every transaction published monthly. A community restoration fund. 5% of all dues to go toward local projects, starting with the public dock garden. No one argued. The motion passed unanimously, 23-0. That's how leverage turned into legacy. Later, after the papers were signed, Joe raised his thermos in a mock toast. "To Mark," he said. "Guy who evicted an HOA with math and manners." Everyone laughed, and I swear I heard Sarah's laugh between theirs, light and familiar, carried across the water. We got to work fast. Marcus and a few others cleared brush along the lakeshore for what would become the Sarah Danner Memorial Garden. Janet organized a file archive of every public record, open to anyone. Even the kids helped paint the new community mailbox. Visual beat number 3. On dedication day, we planted the first marigold at sunrise. The petals were orange as fire, the same color that once lit the violation notices I'd burned. The smell of damp earth mixed with cedar and coffee, and for a moment, the entire place stood still. That evening, the local paper ran a small feature. Former HOA reforms into resident-led cooperative. Transparency and restoration take root at Pine Shore. Under the photo, you could see the new sign at the gate. Welcome to Pine Shore Cooperative, built by its people, not its power. It's been 6 months now. The roads are patched, the lights work, and not one resident has received a violation letter. We vote online, post budgets in public, and meet by the dock once a month with coffee and laughter. Even the old HOA members, what's left of them, attend quietly, humbled. Sometimes I walk out at night, barefoot on the cool boards of the dock, and watch the porch lights reflecting on the lake. I think about Sarah's promise, about what it meant to keep it alive and loud. Turns out, she was right. Living loud doesn't mean shouting, it means standing up. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. As responsible citizens, share this so others learn and get inspired, because the next fight might not be yours, but it'll belong to someone who needs this blueprint. The final entry in the file, the one I keep on my shelf, ends with a single sentence handwritten in black ink. Justice isn't loud, it's precise. And sometimes, when the wind shifts off the lake just right, I swear I can hear her voice whisper back, "You did good, Mark. Now go find the next one."